Good morning, folks. Welcome back. It's another beautiful day out here. We got Kelly home. She's doing yard work. Got my brother Jim up here from Oklahoma helping out with some chores around the ranch. We've been cutting some tree stumps. And we went and picked up our beef the other day. My cousin was kind enough to offer me a quarter of beef. And we got the bones. And we're going to make some bone broth with that. When we were at the butcher telling them what we wanted for our cuts of beef, and I told them I wanted all my bones back, they kind of looked at me funny, but got to be other people to do it too. We're going to get this pot full of water. We'll show you how to do this, and we're going to make us some really good bone broth today. So we've been boiling these bones all day long. We got to run into town, so I'm going to shut them off for a little bit, and then I'll let them breathe tonight while it cools off. And we'll boil them some more tomorrow. But it's going to get down close to freezing tonight, so it'll be fine out here in the garage. But that's what it's looking like. We've probably lost about 4 inches of water while we've been boiling today. But those bones still got a little bit more to give up. So we're going to boil a little bit more. We skimmed the scum off the top when it formed up earlier today. Got all of it. And then tomorrow we're going to throw some few sprigs of rosemary in here, and probably a couple onions and some carrots and some celery to give up some of that juice. And we're going to boil it way down further than this. We'll come back and show you that. We're actually going to can this. We're going to jar it up and pressure can it and put it in the root cellar for some good stock when we need it. So we'll see you back. Good morning, folks. It's 4 o'clock in the morning on day 2. Last night when we got home, I put a big bag of ice in here. Whenever you're cooking something, if you don't want it to spoil, between the temperatures of 140 and 70, you want to bring that down as quick as you can. So I put a whole bag of ice in there to keep it get below that temperature as quick as I could. We're going to fire this thing back up and continue to boil down. And once the bones have given up everything they can give up, we're going to take the bones out of the mix, and we'll transfer all this to a big stainless steel stock pot that I have, and we'll continue to cook it down. And we're going to add some herbs and some vegetables, some carrots and celery and onions, give it a little more hearty flavor, and then we're going to jar this stuff up. But for now, we're going to get this thing going again, and we'll come back with you later. One mention, we are cooking this in a big aluminum pot, and some people stray away from aluminum, but if you're cooking something that is not acidic, you are okay. So if there's no high acid material, you're okay. You don't want to store it in aluminum, but you're okay to cook it in it. But if you're cooking anything like with tomatoes, or if you're putting wine in it or something like that, you want to stay away from the aluminum. All right, we'll be back. Well, we're back. It's now 8 o'clock, and I think we're at a point where we can start taking bones out of there. This thing's been boiling for about 8 hours, and we've reduced the amount of liquid by about half. I think the bones have given up everything they're going to give up. So we'll start pulling bones out of here, and we'll get this transferred to my stainless steel big stock pot. We'll throw some veggies in there and some herbs. Let's start pulling bones. So you can see all the marrows come out of all these bones, and that's the good stuff. Once the good stuff is out, there's no more need to boil them. Alright, we got all the bones pulled out. We've got it transferred to the stainless steel pot, and we've emptied this pot out. Anytime you got aluminum, you do not want to let that sit. You want to make sure you clean that out as soon as you get it empty, because otherwise it'll start corroding on you. But this pot's small enough we can lose this big burner and take it in the house and finish it off in there. You can already see there's a layer of gelatin formed on the top, and that's the good stuff. You eat a little bit of that stuff, you won't need to take any more glucosamine. That'll fix your joints right up. Alright, we brought this in the house on the stove. We've put the onions and the carrots and the celery in there. Celery tops, everything. All I did was wash the vegetables and cut the nasty ends off of them. I just did a really rough chop. You don't have to get crazy because they're basically going to disappear in this stock. I threw in a little bit of thyme and a little bit of rosemary, and I tied those together so I can pull all those stalks out later. Some of the leaves are going to get into the stock. And when we drain all these solids out of here, usually I don't even skin the onions, I just throw everything in, but I'm going to take all these solids out when I strain it, and I'm going to make little individual doggy treats for Brandy the Wonder Dog that you can hear in the background. So we're going to start boiling this again. The vegetables that you use to put in your stock or even soup, they don't have to be pristine vegetables right from the grocery store. If stuff's getting a little wilty and a little rubbery, still good for soup. You're not worried about the crunch when you're making soup or stock. So you can still use that stuff. Clean your refrigerator out. I had some leftover onions in the refrigerator that I threw in with it because they were not going to be any good in a few days. So use up the stuff you got. It's still good. All right, folks, we're on to day 3 of our bone broth adventure. So this is all of the solids that were left when we strained the broth out. And this is the best dog food that you could ever come up with. And I'm going to save it in baggies for Brandy the Wonder Dog. I gave her some this morning and she lapped it up like it was alive. She really liked it. Make sure when you do this, you put your hands in there and feel around and squish around and make sure you get every little bone particle that you can find out of there, or all of them, not all the ones you can find. But you'll feel them once you get your hands in there and pull them all out. And I'm going to put these in little baggies, like I said, and we're going to seal them up and put them in the freezer for Brandy for a little treat, maybe a couple times a week. But it's full of vegetables. It's got beef in there. It's got all the connective tissue and the cartilage. Good stuff for her bones and her joints, and very nutritious and better than any soft dog food you're going to buy downtown. Now the bone broth is in another pot down in the refrigerator in the basement. We cooled that off overnight, but I'm not going to can it till tonight, so I can just let it sit overnight and cool off in the pressure canner. But we'll go over the canning process tonight. The reason I put it in the cooler downstairs was once it cools off in the refrigerator, I can take that layer of fat off the top and discard it. So it's a lot healthier. You're not eating all the fat. I'm not afraid of a little beef fat, but if I'm making stock, I'd rather have it just a clear broth if I can. But we'll be back tonight and we'll show you that. I'm going to start bagging up Brandy's dog food. All right, we got that all bagged up. We got some nice little frozen treats for the dog. That's going to be so good for her because of all the gelatin and everything in there. It'd be so good for her joints and stuff, and a lot of good food in there. Like a little doggy beef stew. In fact, my brother ate some of that last night thinking it was beef stew, and he enjoyed it. So if the zombie apocalypse ever comes, we could eat that too if we had to, because it's human safe. All it is food. But those are nice little snacks if you go on like a picnic or something and take the dog, pull one of those out of the freezer, and by the time you have your little picnic, it'll be thawed out for the dog, and even the dog will have a nice little treat. But the dog's not the only thing that would enjoy that. Chickens would tear that up. Hog would think they were having a gourmet meal. So don't throw that stuff away. Use it. So like I said, we're going to do the canning tonight of the beef broth. And we'll bring you back for that. This isn't the end of the video yet, even though it's probably getting long. But we'll show you how to pressure can. I want to do it at night so I can just let that canner just thaw or cool down on its own overnight. We'll just let her sit. So we'll see you tonight. Okay, we are in for the night, so it's time to get this bone broth canned up. We got our jars clean. We got our bone broth that we got to peel the fat cap off of there. We've got our pressure canner heating up. And we're going to get this going. First thing we're going to do is pull that fat off and discard that. And then we'll put a fire back underneath that and heat that back up. Alright, we got the fat skimmed off. You can see the line where it was. There was probably 2 inches of fat in this pot. Filled up a whole grocery bag. I had no idea there was that much fat in that mix. Didn't look like there was that much fat on the bones. Anyway, the canner's starting to heat up. We've got our jars ready. You don't have to go... Here's my lids over here. A lot of people boil these and put them in boiling water and all that. There's really no need for that. A lot of old timers did that back in the day, just like they overcooked pork like crazy. But this is basically an autoclave. Everything, the jar inside and out, is going to be sterile by the time this thing's done. So don't get all crazy with your sterilization. When you're steam canning, it's really not necessary. One thing that's a good practice to do, if you got a steam canner, take this rubber ring out and flip it over. Because this thing's been resting for probably a year. It's going to get a memory in it, and sometimes you'll have sealing problems. So I've never had a problem if you flip that over. Alright, we're filling our jars. If you hold your jar up and hang this over the edge of the pot, you don't make such a big mess, because you notice that ladle is already dripping. And you're going to want to leave 1 inch of headspace in this jar, and that's right up to where that little ring is on the shoulder. And if you're going to fudge it, don't go above, go below, because this stuff having a little grease in it, if that gets up underneath the seal, chances are your jar is not going to seal. So make sure you leave plenty of headspace. We're going to fill what we can with the rest of these jars, and we'll come back when we're putting them in the canner. So we got our jars filled. We got 5 quarts. If you remember that big pot we had out in the garage, that was a 50-quart pot, and we probably had it filled with bones and water up to probably 40 quarts. So I don't know why I'm wiping that water jar. So what we're doing, if any grease got on that seal, that vinegar will clean that off. It's not for really sterilization. Like I said, it sterilizes just fine in there. So we did that just to get any grease off. What these 2 jars are, it just takes up space in the canner. So you don't want the jars, it's boiling in there, you don't want them moving around and breaking. So these don't need lids. We just put them in there. But we're going to lid these up real quick. Now the broth, we didn't bring that up to a boil either, and you don't need to. The liquid does not need to be boiling going into those jars. That canner will not come up to pressure until that water is boiling. So the jars will come up to a boil inside the canner. And these don't have to be crazy tight, because when they start boiling, they're going to purge out a little bit. So you want them to be able to do that. So just kind of finger tight. You don't want to go all really crazy on them. So we'll put these in the canner now. Again, these aren't boiling hot, so I don't need to use the tongs putting them in. And you don't need to cover the jars with water. You just need enough water in the canner to where you're not going to run out of water during your processing time. Now, processing time for quart jars is 25 minutes. But due to our elevation here, we need to go an extra 5 minutes. So it's going to be 30 minutes at 10 pounds. Let me grab the lid. Have the lid soaking in a little bit of water to kind of rehydrate that seal. Alright, got the lid on. We got our vent open. So we're going to wait for this thing to start steaming. Remember, this thing won't start boiling and steaming until everything in there is up to boiling temperature. And we'll let this steam for a little bit until the steam comes out solid. And then we'll close this down. And then we'll bring this up to 10 psi. And we'll hold it at 10 psi for our time, which is going to be 30 minutes for these quarts. And then we'll just let it cool down on its own. That's why we're doing it at night. I'll just turn the fire off and go to bed. This thing will cool off all on its own, and in the morning it should be nice and cool. You don't want to pull your jars out or let that steam bleed off, way too fast, because then you'll start breaking jars and stuff. Those jars are going to be super hot when they come out, and if you expose them to cold air, they'll break on you. Now, some people are afraid of these steam canners. They're kind of old-fashioned. But they're not really dangerous if you know what you're doing. And even if you don't know what you're doing, you put this thing on high and you just walked away. It's not going to explode. You see there's a little rubber burst disc here in the middle. That burst disc will come flying out of there, and you'll get a big geyser of steam coming out of there. Look like Old Faithful. It'll fill your kitchen full of steam, but it's not going to blow up. So don't be so afraid of these things. So when we bring this thing up to 10 pounds, I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like. Okay, you see that little wispy steam coming out of that vent? That is not enough steam. You want to wait until the steam is solid and not just intermittent. And we'll show you what that looks like when it gets there. Okay, our steam is pretty much constant. So we're going to go ahead and close our vent down. And we're going to bring that up to pressure. As you might imagine, this is not a process you want to walk away from, because once that gets up to pressure, you're going to have to maintain the pressure by throttling the burner up and down to maintain that pressure. Gas stoves are a little bit easier because it's instantaneous, but electric is a little tougher. Now, the one really stupid thing you could do is open that lid while it's under pressure. And that would be very bad. You'd burn yourself pretty bad, probably. A lot of steam in there, and it's going to come out of there real quick, and probably some of that boiling water, too. Now, the newer canners, the lid expands and it locks, so you can't open it while it's under pressure. The lid kind of raises up and locks into position, and it won't settle back down and unlock until it's cooled off, which is a pretty cool safety feature. But these old ones, they don't have that feature. So don't ever pull that lid off while it's under pressure at all. Make sure your vent's open before you open it and there's nothing escaping. Yeah, that would be all bad. I've actually got two of these. One of them was my grandma's. Maybe both of them. I don't know. My mom's going to have to tell me on that one. But they're pretty old. And when my mom was done canning, she passed these down to me, luckily, because they're very expensive. And when canning season gets going, I get two of these pots going. I can do 7 jars in each pot. So while I'm prepping one, get it going, I prep the other one. By the time I get the other one going, the other one's about done. So it's sometimes it's an all-day process. We go all day. They do make them so you can double stack quart jars. It's a lot taller, and you can put 14 jars in one. I would love to have one of those, but very, very pricey, so I'm going to have to make do with my 2 canners. Alright, we've reached 10 pounds. If you've got a small burner like me, 10 pounds may be all you're going to get. If your burner's too small, you might not be able to come up to pressure. So be mindful of that. So let's start our time over here. And we're going to keep an eye on this thing and turn it down as need be. It looks like we're just a little bit over 10 pounds, so I'm going to turn that burner down a little bit. And we'll be back in about 30 minutes. Now, if for some reason you throttle back your stove too much and you drop below 10 pounds, some people say you need to start completely over your whole time. But I've always been told that you stop the time at that point, and then when your pressure comes back up to 10, restart your time. You don't have to start the whole 30 minutes over again. I've also seen people use, and I've even done it, use my big camp stove out in the garage, my big 2-burner camp stove. You can do that. Just be very careful. That's a lot of heat really fast. Again, if you're going crazy, full out throttle on everything, you might start breaking jars. So be careful with that. Okay, we were climbing a little bit above 10. I turned it down to medium, and then it continued to climb, so I turned it down to low. So now we're dropping back to 10 psi. So being that it was dropping, I turned it back to medium. And we'll see what that does. If it starts to climb again, we will go back to low. I'm thinking it continued to climb because it was on high previously and the heat just kept building. So we'll see. Looks like we're just a little bit above 10 again. So we're going to put it halfway between medium and low. See what that does. So while we're waiting, I'll go over some of the gear you might want to buy if you want to get into canning. Unless you're doing steam canning, it's fairly cheap. These are expensive. You could pay upwards to $300 for a real high quality one of these. But if you're not doing steam canning, which is necessary for low acid foods, it's pretty cheap. You don't have to buy a lot of stuff. Here's your jar lifters right here. This is what you'll find in the store generally. But I've found when lifting wide mouth jars, these don't feel very safe to me. So I actually found a wide mouth set of tongs that also works on smallmouth. But they're even spring loaded. I love that. They got nice rubber tips on the end, and these feel much more stable when you're lifting largemouth jars. You're going to need a funnel to fill your jars, and that keeps the top of your jar from getting like food on it when you're filling it. Also, like this one here, when the items that you're putting in the jar reach the top of the bottom of the funnel there, you've got exactly 1 inch of headspace. I really like this one too because it's got a small funnel that clamps onto the bottom or just pushes onto the bottom if you need to fill like a bottle with something. And it's also got a strainer that snaps in the middle. So I really like this plastic one. I think it's Tupperware. This is a lid magnet. So if you got your lids in a pot of boiling water, which I do for water bath, you can pull lids out one at a time with your magnet and put them on your jars without burning your fingers. A little spatula, like if you're making pickles and you need to get the air bubbles out of the jar after you pour your brine in, works good for that. They actually make a custom one of these just for canning that's got like a little step ladder on the bottom that you can gauge your headspace in the jar with. It shows you all the different headspaces. But I've been doing it long enough I can guess I don't need something that crazy special. This is a water bath canner over here. You place your jars right in this just with some boiling water. It's got the jar rack that you can lift, even hooks on the sides so you can let your jars drip dry a little bit before you pull them out. And if you're double stacking, it's even got a thing you can set on top of your first stack of jars. Say you're doing pints, you could fill that full of pint jars, put that little ring on top and fill it full of pint jars again. You can't do that with quarts that are too tall. You could do it with a quart and a pint maybe, or half pints you could try if you're doing the same stuff. Now I mentioned the different types of canning. Low acid food has to be pressure sterilized or steam canned. High acid foods such as tomatoes, peaches, any kind of acidic fruit, anything like that, you can water bath, and it's much easier. You just put them in boiling water for a period of time, depending on what you're doing. You can find all those times online. But it's just a water bath. Now they make a water bath steamer now, to where it's kind of an inverted pot. There's like a small tray on the bottom that you put water in. You put your jars in it, and the lid is like this big, and you turn the lid over onto it, and it just, instead of a water bath, it's a steam bath, which actually gets a little bit hotter than water. So yeah, so these are really cheap. If you can't find one at the store, a lot of Hispanic markets have them because they steam tamales in these too. So if you're unable to find one, you'll probably find one at your local Hispanic market. So we're still at 10 psi. We got about 4 minutes to go. We'll see you back then. All right, it's been 30 minutes. Here's how we finish. You do that, and then you can go to bed. Now, I can do that because I have no more to can. But if I was doing green beans or tomatoes or something like that, I'd have 2 canners going, like I said before, and I'd have to refill these. So let me go over that process with you. You see I got a towel laid out on the counter. The reason we do that is when you pull jars out of a hot canner, you don't want them to hit a cold surface, cold counter. So you need some type of cloth down to protect it. So the procedure for doing that is you turn the fire off. You wait till that goes all the way down to 0 on its own. You do not open that vent yet because that's too much pressure released at one time, and again, you can break jars. So when this goes down to 0, then you can open your vent. And when you open your vent, the rest of that steam will come out of there. And then when that completely stops steaming, then you can open your lid. And as you might imagine, you want to open the lid away from you. You don't want to open it towards you to where you get a face full of steam. And then you set the lid aside, and you'll see the contents of the jars will be boiling. So when the jars stop boiling, when you stop seeing air bubbles come up to the tops of the jars, you can pull those jars out and then put them on the counter. You don't have to dump the water out. You can, unless maybe one of your jars broke or something. You don't have to dump the water out. Just add whatever water you need. Just kind of gauge how far it went down so you'll know how much to put in. Reheat it, refill it, and same process. Bleed the steam out, bring it up to pressure, and time it again. But we're going to go to bed. It's been a long, long day. We'll bring you back in the morning. Okay, folks, 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't ask me why I'm up. But the canner was all cooled down, no more pressure in it, so I went ahead and pulled the jars out. They're still pretty warm. Every one of them sealed, 100% success rate. You can see some of the meat solids have made it to the top of the jar, which is not a problem. It's not very attractive, but it's still good eats. If you didn't want that, you could strain your broth through like a fine cheesecloth or something like that and catch all those goodies and don't put them in, but I don't see the need to do it. That's going to make some real good soup or some gravy or whatever we want to use that for. So I hope you've enjoyed your little intro to canning. I hope you try canning. Some people say, why would you go to all that trouble? Just go to the store and buy what you need. Well, may not be able to go to the store, at some point. So you got to know how to do this stuff. I like the satisfaction of creating something myself, growing something myself, and putting it away and having it for future use. So just a satisfaction I get out of that. So I hope you try canning. There's all kinds of canning books and canning information out there that you can use, recipes. You can can anything. It's really neat. So I hope you try it. Until next time, come on back and see us at Mark Kelly Farms. Stay safe, stay healthy, y'all.